Yeah. Thanks, Meg, and hi, everyone. I think this is so exciting to be part of something which I'm passionate about. I have had on professional front a journey of about 15 years, and it's been interesting that my personal life led me to many countries, to different mindsets, to different thinking. And I'm back home and coming back and now working with a diverse set of teams globally. It has now when I look back, it makes me realize that all those 15 years made me learn towards something. And I think it's my responsibility to help, be part of these sessions where I can bring those learnings back to you all. And in a way, also learn from more and more from such forums. So super excited and thank you for giving me the opportunity here.
Thank you. All right, so let's dive in with kind of a big topic first. How does having diversity within leadership teams contribute to better decision-making processes and outcomes?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite like simple in my mind of thinking. It's very logical. Like, say, if you have to make any decision in your life, you want to evaluate options and choices, right? And that options and choices helps you make an informed decision. So with diversity in that mix, what you bring to the table is very unique. Every person from different, whether it's the ethnicity or orientation, diversity brings that uniqueness into the mix of the topic that's being discussed. And as a leader, either or as a part of a leadership group, what I've realized is that sometimes you're talking about topics that could be as diverse from business perspective into or foraying into a new market to even thinking about our organization and the culture there. And for every of this theme, diverse outlooks and angles helps make that decision easy. Because it's not just about knowing that you're making a decision quickly, but also knowing that the decision that you're making is very sound. So 100% I agree that, it makes rather diversity makes your job easier as a leader, because the more you have diverse group, you can trust the fact that the options will be well thought through, and it will have uniqueness and a perspective which one person cannot bring to the table. So yeah, and that's what it has helped me with immensely.
Yeah, I very much appreciate when we're talking in terms of diversity, we're not talking about whether someone is a culture fit, right? We're talking about where they are a culture at. So where are the gaps that person that not even that specific person, where are the gaps in your system that you don't have, specific representation, present and active at the table too. It's not just enough to invite people, you have to listen to them as well.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, so how can a leadership team help to foster innovation when they are diverse? If you're looking at a team that is very homogenous, in what ways can a more diverse group of leadership really drive success within an org?
Absolutely. So Meg, take it this way, like for Expedia, and I'm really representing my company at the core of also being one of the diverse employee here is that it is powering travel everywhere for everyone, right? So with that in mind, when we say we have a global outlook, we want to look at travelers across the globe. We want to invite them and enjoy the travel, and it could be for different reasons. It is of paramount importance for the leadership team itself to be looking from that perspective of how can we make this traveler led or traveler centric. And in order for that to happen, you need leaders who are coming from diverse background. So I'll give an example that there are times when we are looking towards how do we bring a perspective for what solo women travelers would need. Now, that a lot comes from not just, yes, you can do research, you can do insights building, you can figure out what competitors are doing, but a woman can tell you what she wants when she's traveling, right? So that kind of a thinking of, as we are supporting our travelers, another great big area, and this is like Expedia has been foraying into it for years now, is about, bringing inclusion for every type of orientation, like LGBTQ community. So with that mindset, like it is very important for leaders to be fully integrated into that thinking. It cannot be, oh, I'm just implementing a feature, let's do some research. But understanding, like, what does it mean to be a travel company that supports this diverse traveler led thinking, you need to have leaders doing the same. And that's where it percolates down from. So when I, as a product leader, is thinking around strategies on, what should be the features, what should be the capabilities, how do we make travel easy for our travelers? I'm looking into these different personas. I'm looking into these different diverse groups and then thinking about it. But again, I can't do this all by myself. So my diverse team helps me bridge some of that gap easily. And that's what I said, like, whether it's decision making or whether it's like fostering innovation, the diversity is like the simple answer to it. It's like no to questions. Rather, I think a lot of leaders are missing out on how easy it makes to bring innovation, or how easy it makes to bring decision making to a quality, which when your groups are not diverse.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the benefits that an organization can derive when they have a diverse leadership team. We've talked about bringing different products to market, or having different, a different say-so within like decision-making processes. But what are some of the specific benefits that you could look forward to once you had, a more diverse leadership team in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think business benefits we all understand. I think to me, diversity is like this magnet which will trigger the growth loop. And I'll explain you how I think around this entire aspect. So it is both internal and external, how it brings that loop into the picture. Diversity drives diversity, right? If you'll have diverse leadership, you will have that mindset to build diverse teams. And as you build these diverse teams, you are creating a mark in the market to say that, we at Expedia want to build diversity into our mix. And that kind of enhances the value of your brand. And once that happens, I think it's not just about, it's a global shift. It's about people like me or anybody who wants to work for organizations that are inclusive and diverse. They would see this as forthcoming ones to join, and they would want to be part of such organizations. So it becomes a part of that cultural aspect. Then the second thing which I see, it's twofold. The second, internally, what I see is diversity really builds trust, because diversity in a way also has the second side of the coin, which is around inclusion. If you are diverse, that means what you're, or if you actually respect diversity, you are in a way really aware of differences, and you are in a way aware of understanding, like how these differences could be celebrated. So when you start thinking on those lines, you're actually fostering inclusion into the mix. And when inclusion becomes a key factor in the mix, it's in a way building trust within the group of people. So with that respect, I really feel like it's such a powerful aspect and tool which companies can leverage in building their own culture within the company, but also creating that brand value for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Is that you're not just doing this. I feel like a lot of times when we hear people talk about DEIB, it's through a specific lens, and it's usually as an outsider, right? We don't really tend to talk about it in other terms, especially as what is affecting us in our daily lives. And so I think it is really important that we highlight the fact that you have to look at this from both sides, right? You can't just be looking at it from your own perspective. If you keep standing where you are now, you're not going to understand what you're missing, because you're limiting your own perspective and your own viewpoint. So yeah, absolutely wonderful. Have you ever seen this? Like, so if we're talking about wanting to make your leadership team more diverse, make it more reflective of your audience, your client base, your workforce, whatever it might be. As people are in this space and trying to make those changes to lead to a diverse leadership team, have you seen this gone wrong in any way? Like, meaning like, people that they're focusing on the wrong aspect of diversity, maybe?
I think what happens sometimes is that diversity just becomes a number in mind.
Yeah.
Like, I want diverse candidates, and especially a lot in the India context, it becomes, how do I bring more female candidates or female employees into the mix, right? And I will give you my own example working with Expedia. And I think it also shows, like, sometimes there are places where you auto correct. So Expedia has a strong drive for bringing women at workforce, like at different levels and seniority, and that's great. But within my team, we had certain goals on how many women candidates we want to include for different positions. And what I realized was that I actually had enough women candidates in my group. And where I needed diversity was for men to be included as part of the mix. So I think that's really where I feel like there is something for us as leaders to understand that diversity doesn't mean only representing the underrepresented groups or only talking about one aspect of things where we want to move the needle. It is about looking at your mix and saying, you know what, I have a good mix of people with different perspective, different thinking, especially in global companies. I fight for, Meg, to have teams where I have representation of my teams across the different EMEA or US, because what that helps me with is that one, I learn a lot through that. And second, I feel like those are the things where we need to factor attention on, like how many, folks we have who are from African American community, how many folks we have, who are from India, or how many folks we have. Like that is also the mix we have to be very, very cognizant about.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where I think sometimes the correction has to happen, is that because it should not be a fad. It should not be something that you're targeting for is just because everybody is talking of bringing inclusion into the mix and bringing women into more power, that it's just one. It is about creating that healthy mix and making every ethnicity and orientation feel like secure and safe in their own group. Yeah, so those are some of the things which I ponder as I think about building my own group teams.
Well, I love what you said first off the bat, which was, when you're looking for diversity in your own team, it's not what people might normally think of diversity, right? We deal with this a lot with some of the different clients that we have, where absolutely, like, diversity is going to mean a completely different thing in different settings, depending on who is underrepresented within that particular group. So yeah, I think it's really important that people remember that, just because we're not looking for the person that you think of when you hear diversity hire, does not mean that person's voice isn't as valid. You know what I mean? Like, just because it's not what you expect. I think that's wonderful. Okay, so all right, let's talk about some of the training. So once you have brought in, or when you're trying to bring in a more diverse workforce, you're trying to diversify your workforce, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? Like, it seems a bit circular and hard to figure out where to start. So if you are from the org perspective, are there any kind of training or development programs that you can put in place to support the advancement of diverse talent, especially into leadership roles once they make it to your org?
Absolutely. I think the way I look at it is it all has to start with the intent. And I think that's the core of it. Like when we say we want to foster diversity, it has to really start with that intent to do that. I think nowadays, Meg, there are a lot of like these trainings which are given by very reputed universities where they talk about inclusion and diversity. But I think it's not even that hard. Like you have to go out and spend so much of money to get to the best of the trainings and learn and be aware. I think they're just simple rules which I think any company can follow and can create those kind of learning model within their orgs. I think one has to start with like bring underrepresented groups into informal communities. We do that a lot. We have a whole Pride chapter. We have a chapter around, how women in tech can be supported. Especially in India, Meg, the interpersonal communities, they thrive like anything. We as leaders also try to, take some of that leverage from those interpersonal relations and communities so much to drive business. So I think it has to really start from having champions and allies who see the value of having these communities in first place. And then the role of these communities really becomes like gather people to understand, make them aware of diversity. What does diversity mean? That's to your point, right? Like people get confused between inclusion and diversity. What does diversity means? What does it mean in terms of differences? How would that impact you and your work in that manner? So these are some of the things like, and then how do you, with those differences, bring perspective and build trust amongst your group. I think these are some of the trainings that can happen um, for all the leaders within the organization, where they should be, actively looking into it. These could be some of the compulsory and mandatory trainings which leaders should be doing, so that they are keeping themselves um, hooked to that idea of what it is to be diverse, right? And outside of that, I know in my own organization, HR team, human resources playing a very, very pivotal role in just making sure that we are also bringing that trainings in-house, but also in terms of how we are being given guidance at the time of interviews. So when we say cultural fit for a leader, the one of the big aspect is, how does that leader look around diversity and inclusion? It's not a straightforward question answer to them. It's more like an implied question from where we are able to read that is that person a cultural fit? And more stress on this cultural aspect or cultural fit is actually put in higher roles. So for directors, senior directors, that coefficient of what it is to be a cultural fit in terms of diversity is very, very critical. So I think these are some of the measures. You can always do trainings. There's tons of material. You can create these informal groups and build these groups in a way where there is a very informal way of actually understanding and learning from each other. But also, HR can play a very key role in introducing some of this into the entire interview process, to make sure that we are bringing leaders who are embedded into the same philosophy and ideology that we want to foster.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that, as I'm thinking about this, I'm like thinking back over just like some of the leadership that I've been under in my numerous careers, and been like, oh yeah, that fits with them. No, that probably wouldn't fly. So yeah, I think this is absolutely wonderful, wonderful advice here. And I very much appreciate what you said about the trainings, like not necessarily having to be an actual training. Maybe it's just, networking and mixing. Maybe it's a social thing for, for the group or for the org, but that's how you're going to get people making connections. It doesn't have to be like, hey, we're having a seminar this afternoon, everybody come to the lunchroom. It doesn't have to be like that. So I think that's wonderful. And I absolutely love what you said earlier about kind of getting buy-in from other people who are, who are passionate about this, who might be in a position with a little more leverage or a little more privilege or power than you have. Because, we're not going to get where we want to with only half the people on board, right? So we need people to understand that everyone needs to be utilizing their privilege and their authority for this. And those of us that are already in a position of privilege or of power need to use that for good, so that other people benefit.
Yeah, and in fact, Meg, that actually reminds me, and I don't know how I forgot about this important thing. This actually helped me and supported me to my next level of progression. In Expedia, we also have a sponsor program, and that's really the program which is different from mentorship. The idea there is that you look into these underrepresented groups, certain ethnicities, and try to see how leaders can sponsor you for your next level. And I think it's been so powerful. I have been one of the person who actually was part of that group for my own career growth and development. And it actually helped me achieve that. So, and the leaders at that level I'm talking about are like super senior, the leadership team at VP and above. So that kind of the thing, that's where I've been saying it's not about, marketing Expedia on a global platform. The reason which has kept me going with this company for 6 years and beyond, and especially when, I've been across the world and I was trying to look back into which company should I settle in. I think the major reason is about this cultural aspect that Expedia gives and how seriously it means business is business. So those kind of programs, I think every company, and I don't know who are the folks who are listening, if they are at that position, I think you can get mentors, you can get coach, but you need sponsors. And that's truly where, if there is the intent, you want to bring diversity in that leadership roles, please do so. That's very, very fulfilling, not just for the person who is your sponsor, but also like a person like me who got that value will be able to give back that value to the community. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been a wonderful conversation. Truly, they always are. But yeah, I want to make sure we've got to any of the questions from the chat here. Okay, so this person had asked, no, we'll skip that one. Okay, so let's talk about the idea of diversity as like kind of ticking boxes. Okay. What should people's goals be if you are trying to increase the diversity in your org, but you don't want to treat it like checking a box or like hitting a quota? Are there any guidelines for how people should consider this or what they should think of when they're trying to diversify their leadership?
Yeah, I think start with baby steps. We don't want to build like the Rome was not built in a day, right? So we don't want to make everything happen in one go. It is important to understand like your own team mix. If you exactly to the point, like especially on the product side, Meg, there are not like I don't have like big teams. So for me, it may be easier just to say, oh, here I have a handful of female team members. I may need a male team member. I may need a global team just to get that perspective to see, understand what is your team mix current. Um, Try to start with ingesting, like if you have a global team, try to start seeing how this team can work in different integrated locations together. It can also mean that it's not your team, but it's the other teams that you work with, like especially on product side, sometimes my tech teams are based out of another location, right? So, and that's the beauty. When you say it's a team, it is a team that comprises of so many different functional groups. So when you are instilling that whole thought of diversity, you should see how is that mix really, being built into making a certain project go live, in making a certain initiative getting driven. If you have the power to make decisions about, who to hire and you're into that positions, definitely the more you will study your mix, you can make small decisions. Okay, like, I have these three positions. I don't want to go all out filling all these three positions with one type of candidates or like women candidates. Just start with having just one women candidate, but certain that once you hire that person, keep the mindset of inclusion. Because a lot of times what happens is it's like an open funnel. You bring diversity, but you don't support diversity. And then it tanks. So start with fewer folks, start with one or two measures, and then just learn and grow through it. And as I would say, like, read about it. There is so much of material out there. If you feel passionate about it, start the group. Like, we in India, it's not as advanced and it's not been in the mainstream to talk about LGBTQ community, right? But we started with this chapter. It used to be a closed door communication where a handful of us would get into a conference room and discuss about it. Now we are having like events and forums where it's an open forum where people come and listen and learn, right? So I think you don't know what wonders it will happen. And my advice always have been to my other friends in the company is, it doesn't matter how much participation you get. It doesn't matter, if you're able to make this change in a huge way. Just start small and start in whatever easy way you can fit in. And you'll see that it will just grow. Like you need champions, you need allies. And if you can build those as being one, I think that's where it all begins.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We've got one more question from the audience. This person wants to know, what steps can organizations take to overcome unconscious bias in the leadership selection process? So this is a good one, right? The higher you rise in an org, most of the time you see the diversity numbers drop off or the group start to look much more similar. So what steps could an org take to try and prevent this?
Yeah. So Meg, again, I'll quote the example of my company on how they are taking, and that's also very, very profound in the way. So periodically, HR does these audits. Like we have to call out how many different diverse candidates are in the highest level, in the next level, at every level, right from the CEO down. Like, of course, there's one CEO, but right from there, the presidents, then your VPs, your SVPs, like every level is audited in terms of understanding what is the mix. Then there is another step taken on what is a healthy mix that should be there. There are tons of trainings that HR does in our place where leaders are made to actually own this as part of their objectives, OKRs. Like this is their OKRs to have this much shift as part of their teams. So I think that's really what is important here is while at a very operational level, like person like me or somebody who has small teams, big teams can take these little steps, but this enforcement has to come from HR organized departments who have to like take this up to that leadership level where every time there has to be a check, like why it is not. And it happens. It's not like these are theoretical concepts, since it's happening in one workplace. And I know, like, these things are then becomes like a kind of a cycle. It's like how you have an appraisal cycle, how you have an evaluation cycle, you have a cycle, you have objectives to bring that diversity into it. There are, like, especially for India, Expedia, there are very serious goals which presidents have on growing a certain geo by certain level. And not only that, it's also about, how you bring then further down, how you bring women into workforce, how you actually then support, other underrepresented groups, and it's across the globe. So I would say, see, generally, if they are global big companies, it has to be more formalized. It cannot be just informal groups supporting and calling those out. Those things may be heard, but they may not be, like, retained for long. So you need formal groups to act there. But yes, in your own ways, you can always do that. You when can become a leader, and that's where I feel like a lot of time these champions have to come from groups or people who are not underrepresented. Like when you, I don't know what is the mix here, but say if there are, male folks who are actually members who are listening here, when you get a chance and you have that, progression to go there, take this to yourself. If you have the authority to do it, then do it. So yeah, it's not easy, but it's not unachievable. And I think largely, I would not just say Expedia, largely global companies are coming to realize the value of it. Forums like you opening up so many TED Talks where these things are being called out openly and importantly. The reason is that it's no more things which could be just nice to have. It is a must have. So when it's a must have, I think it will eventually flow in.
Yeah. No, it very much kind of reminds me, at least in America, of the 8-hour workday, right? Nobody wanted it. Not nobody meaning hires didn't want it. And so, yeah, once everybody realized, like, oh, this is good for everyone. Okay, now we all want it. It wasn't just well, it'd be nice if I didn't have to work every day the rest of my life. Nope, we're done with the 7-day-a-week thing. We're doing 5. So yeah, wonderful. I love that this is going to be the next thing we all need to get on board with. So awesome.
Great.
Shikha, that's going to bring us to the end of time, but thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. It was really, really nice to get to know you and learn from you today.
Thank you so much, Meg, and thanks for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you.